only 17% of Americans are satisfied in the work that they do. And they're looking for purpose. They're looking for meaning. No matter what you do in life, like your vocation, you can use all of that for God's kingdom, for his glory.
You need a younger generation who's hungry for that, who recognizes, man, I'm going to need some wisdom. But you need an older generation who's willing to understand the stewardship of the life they've been given. And when Jesus gave his last commands before ascending to the Father, he said, go make disciples. The most important gift is the gospel. Every man needs a man to put his finger in your chest and an arm around your shoulder. We live in a time where we're like, you do you. The world we're living in with social media, it's this constant projecting of an image that's not real. You don't measure the spiritual maturity of a man outside the home. You measure it inside the home. My kids that were there said, what we wanted out of marriage is what you and mom had. Legacy isn't what you leave for someone. It's what you leave in someone. When you started taking me to that Bible study, I wanted to be a man. There's a younger generation that needs older men in their life. The older men better be available because there's a lot of young men today who
need direction and wisdom.
Totally. And they want it. I think as men, we ought to be the chief repenters. We ought to be the first to say, I messed that up. Forgive me. I was wrong. I'm sorry. And I think God's not going to say, well done, you hard worker, you great builder of enterprise. I think he's going to go, well done, you good and faithful servant.
Well, this is episode 9, I believe, for us.
Come on. I made the top 10.
Top 10, exactly. So crazy enough, when we first started the podcast, went out to lunch with Jeff Dalrymple.
No way.
And he said, person you need to talk to is Brad Sykes.
Yeah.
So we finally got connected with Brad, and we've been enjoying getting to know you at the Friday Bible study when we go, and just seeing the impact that you have. So just short, I know we talk about it all the time, or I've sent you over what we're trying to accomplish with this podcast. But Kingdom ROI for us as young Christian entrepreneurs is, God has given us skill sets, resources, mindsets, and we are trying to steward that to the greatest capability. And we just love the idea of marketplace ministry and what that looks like for us as we are both in business. So that's our idea with it. It's like, how can we connect, number one, the older generation and the younger generation, because there's a weird gap where the younger generation maybe wants to learn and they're hungry. Maybe they don't want to listen from the older generation, but the older generation obviously has a lot of wisdom too. Not that you're older, Brad. Right. I mean, you still got many years of life left. But so we're trying to fill that gap, but also just, create a movement where what can we do if we entrust our full life in service of God, and specifically in marketplace ministry and whatever that looks like in whatever walk of life we're in.
Amen.
So,
well, I want to commend both of you for that vision, because you take any segment of our life, whether it's sports or family, you need somebody to help you, to pave the way. I didn't come up with anything new. I just followed other people, and I had to be willing to listen. And I agree. I think you need both. You need a younger generation who's hungry for that, who recognizes, man, I'm going to need some wisdom. But you need an older generation who's willing to understand the stewardship of the life they've been given.
Sure.
And how do we use that? I don't expect you guys are looking at me like I got all the answers. I may be further down the road. And there may be things that I've done or haven't done that I might be able to share with you and your listeners. So glad to do it.
Yeah. I was actually just listening to a podcast this morning, and it was talking how only 17% of Americans are satisfied in the work that they do. So not fulfilling, they don't enjoy it. And I think our generation, they're beginning to see that. Like they see through that. They love the authenticity and the realness and the rawness, and they're looking for purpose. They're looking for meaning. And so a lot of the reason behind the podcast and why we're starting it is we just want people to see, like, no matter what you do in life, like your vocation, you can use all of that for God's kingdom, for his glory. And so what we love seeing through your story and what you do, and how you just been able to leverage the abilities, the skills that God has given you, and said, how can I use that both in the way that I make money, but also in the way that I can use that as a ministry. And so we just kind of wanted today get into your story, kind of your background, how you got into this, and kind of how it all played out. So for those listening in the audience, Brad is a real estate agent with his wife, and that's kind of their marketplace ministry that they're in, and he uses that in an incredible way where he uses every opportunity he's got to be involved in ministry and just sharing the gospel with everyone he comes along with. So if you could just kind of take us back to kind of how everything got started and how you ended up where you are today.
Well, let's see. How long is this podcast? Well, let me go. I'll just tell you, I am from Houston, Texas, born and raised in Houston. My father is 90, still alive,
that's awesome.
in great shape. And we're all influenced by people over the course of a lifetime. Without question, my father's been the greatest influence in my life. Certainly successful in a worldly sense, but far more than that, just as a husband and a father. My mother went home to be with the Lord back in 2012. And sometimes you don't realize the value of a dad or the value of a coach or a teacher or whatever till later in life when you look back. And for me, later in life was probably in my 30s when we're having our children. And I realized the weight and the pressure of being a dad, working, all those things, trying to balance all that and look back and say, I remember writing a letter to my parents, just telling them, thank you. I think God's very clear in his word about we're to honor our parents. And I think there are unique ways we can do that. And it was kind of like the light bulb had gone off and gone, wow, my parents really did a great job. And it was just a way of saying thank you. So I grew up in the church, didn't come to Christ until I was a senior in high school. And I was invited. In fact, my brother-in-law, who was married to my sister, when he was dating my sister, spent a lot of time. He was over at our house all the time. We spent a lot of time together and really just became very good friends. In fact, his younger brother and I were best friends. But when he started dating my sister, he really became kind of my best friend. He's older than me, so certainly an older guy that I looked up to. And he invited me to a church event at his church. And I say church event, back in the, early 80s, I'll date myself, back in the late 1900s. I didn't know what that meant. What's a church event? And I showed up at a place called Tully Stadium in Houston. We always say, people in Texas, we like to brag how big things are.
Oh, yeah.
Tully Stadium is this massive high school football stadium. And anyway, I showed up to the stadium, parking lot's full. We walk in and the stadium is full. Seats about 30,000.
Wow.
I'm going, this is a church event?
Yeah.
I make my way to the top bleacher. There was no room. Go to the top bleacher. My parents are with me too. And for the first time that night, God gave me ears to hear the gospel. And a guy named Rick Stanley, who is Elvis Presley's stepbrother, gave the gospel message.
Wow.
I heard it.
Yeah.
I responded to it, gave my life to Christ that night. So this is my senior year of high school. What was cool about that, and the reason I tell this story is because my soon-to-be brother-in-law was there, obviously. And when we went home that night, he said, hey, I'm going to pick you up in the morning. I said, great. This was a Friday night, so he's going to pick me up Saturday morning. He picks me up Saturday morning, and I come out to his car, and on the front seat is this Bible right here. I bring this Bible a lot of times when I do things like this because inside that Bible, he wrote some stuff in there. And but one of the things he encouraged me is to say, this walk, this commitment you've just made, you're not going to do this alone. And going back to why you're doing what you're doing. We're not doing this alone.
Exactly.
And I had the great benefit and the great pleasure of having just an older guy in my life who invested in me spiritually.
Right.
And he discipled me for years. And out of that, really, he planted the seed of discipleship in me. And so that's my heart. My heart is to make disciples.
Yeah.
And when Jesus gave his last commands before ascending to the Father, he said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go make disciples. And, okay, where are we going? It's the idea that as you're going, make disciples. So where are you going today? Well, for me, I'm going to work. And so I'm going to make disciples there as God opens those doors. Yeah. I think of Paul in prison who said, pray for us that God would open the door, and that, that we would see it. And I'm thinking, well, Paul, you're in prison. How many opportunities do you have there?
Right.
Didn't matter. Yeah. He took advantage of those opportunities. You mentioned stewardship, and there is a stewardship. When I think of 1 Peter 4:10, it says, as each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as faithful stewards of God's manifold grace. Well, certainly one of the gifts we've been given breath in our lungs. We've given minds, creativity, all the various things, not to mention the spiritual gifts he's given us. The most important gift is the gospel. Right. So how are you stewarding that gospel? I don't need to be a seminary grad. I don't need to be a pastor to steward the gospel, So there's a responsibility and there's a stewardship behind that. So anyway, Houston, after I graduated from high school, I thought I wanted to go play golf, and I played golf in college. Ended up going to TCU, transferred from another school and ended up at TCU thinking I would play golf. It's, any kind of Division I sports. It's intense. You think you're good till you get there and you're like, wow, I'm not that good. Yeah. But I ended up meeting my wife in college, my junior year, and my golf game really got bad because I got far more interested in her. And I realized that this is the girl I'm going to marry. In fact, we got engaged within, I think, 9 or 10 months after meeting. Wow. She was a freshman in college. The only thing her dad required was that I graduate, that one of us would be graduated. I committed to that. But I realized in my senior year of college, I'm about to get married. I don't even have the money to buy a wedding ring. Yeah. I better, because I played golf. I mean, golf. And my parents I was fortunate enough to be able to play a lot of golf and not have to work. Sure. That's not to say I didn't work from time to time, but anyway, so when I was in college and once I realized my golf career was limited, ended up going to work for a very nice men's clothing store in Fort Worth, Texas. In fact, a roommate of mine also worked there, and he encouraged me, said, hey, I'm sure they'd hire you. And so I go over, to meet with the manager of the store. In fact, I still am somewhat in touch with this guy. This is 45 years later. I remember walking in that day and him saying, I remember asking him, hey, Andy, would you guys have any openings? He's like, absolutely. When can you start? I said, when do you want me here? He goes, start Saturday. This was Thursday. I started on Saturday. Wow. I tell the story because it's funny. I'm the baby of 3. I was always kind of shy. Most people would never know that today. Yeah. But I walked into that store on Saturday, no training, no experience, just thrown in there. Saturdays in that business is a busy day. Oh, yeah. And by noon, I've not spoken to one person. The store is packed, but I'm just like intimidated, scared. Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. And my roommate comes over and he says, hey, Brad, by the way, you don't make money unless you sell something. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He goes, you're on straight commission. Is this I didn't know what straight commission was. I didn't even know what that was. What are you talking about?
You need to work, make money.
Exactly. I'm thinking, I've been here 3 or 4 hours. Certainly I've made money. Yeah. He goes, no, you're not making anything. Yeah. And so I kind of came out of my shell, if you will. I started to learn what we sold. And I always kind of had this stigma about sales, like, ooh.
Yeah, like this sleazy sales.
Exactly.
Guy, right?
It's funny. We're sitting at this table. I have great memories of we in this very nice men's store, expensive clothes, is we stacked our pants up on these, what we call draper tables. So imagine this table, but maybe 10 feet longer, and the pants are just stacked up there. And I thought, it's intimidating to try to sell, even back then, $100 pair of pants, which some of them were way more than that. And I thought, gosh, I don't even know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And so I go over to that pant table and I start taking one pant, stacking it up, picking it up, stacking it. And every time I'd move one pant from this stack to this stack, I'd look at the label, who it's made by, where it was made, what it's made of, just facts about the information. And so I kind of just trained myself to see it, know what it was. And then now fast forward about 6-8 months, I'm pretty good. I'm a good salesman.
Yeah.
And I walked into the store one day and Andy said, "Hey, Mr. Lusky wants to see you." Well, Mr. Lusky owned the store. He owned about 12 stores in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area. I knew him not well, but, and I thought, what do you mean he wants me to come down? He goes, yeah, he wants to see you in his office. I'm like, man, what did I do wrong? Well, I'm about, 2 months from graduation. And, so I go down and I walk in his office, and on his desk is an envelope with my name on it. And he comes in, he says, greetings, and hands me the envelope. He says, "Hey, Brad, inside that envelope, I know you're graduating soon. I know you're getting married out of college, out of school. I want you to stay working for me." And inside that envelope is an offer because I'm opening up a new store in Arlington, and I want you to open it.
Wow.
Now, I'm young and dumb. And,
how old would you have been at the time?
I would have been 20, 21.
Okay.
Yeah, 21.
That's awesome. So like Trent's age, Trent's 21.
Yeah.
So
I open that envelope. I get in my car, of course, long before computers and smartphones and all the other stuff. I had been on one interview prior to that.
Did you even know what you were looking at? You're like, what is this?
Well, yes and no. So I had been on one interview prior, had gotten an offer, and I knew what kind of was standard, when you graduate from college. And, but I remember opening that in my car, looking at it, and it was so far better than any other offer. Well, the offer that I had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, I won't share the numbers, but it was pretty significant. And I thought, this is crazy. Called my dad that night. And, again, talk about the wisdom of an older guy. And I'm thinking my careers are going to go this way. Never did I imagine I would do something in the apparel industry.
Yeah.
And my dad asked me that night when I shared what the offer was, he was kind of like, wow, that's nice. He said, all he asked, do you like what you're doing? Do you like that? And I said, yeah, I really do. I like people. And he said, well, then I think there's your answer. Yeah. I'm not saying you're going to like every job you do.
Sure. Right.
I think there's a perspective that we should have as believers that this may be a season. It may be a lifetime. We don't know. But I'm going to do my work well, and I'm not working for you. I'm working for him. And so now I didn't have that perspective early on for certain. But anyway, went to work for this guy, and it was probably, I don't know, I was not of that general. A lot of people that I went to school with, and we got out of college and we went to work. Nowadays you got kids that come out of college, they're getting an MBA, which is great. Listen, I got my MBA working for this guy. He was an entrepreneur.
Hands-on.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It was amazing. I mean, within a month after I got married, I'm in New York City. I'm on buying trips. Very great experience. Yeah. And, while I didn't work for him very long, a couple of years, I got recruited by Ralph Lauren and ended up working for Ralph Lauren for several years, which was again, another great experience. Yeah. So I think there's things, again, you're not going to like everything you do in work. Sure. But find the things you do like and be thankful for them, and the things you don't like, learn them, study them.
Sure.
And so, all those years, especially those first probably 6 to 8 years of my career, were really fuel on a fire that was entrepreneurial. And in the early 1990s, I started a business on my own with another partner. And we had some rough times in the very first year that I realized this probably is not going to work as a partnership. And fortunately, we dissolved that. I basically bought him out and took
Was it
the
something in
business
apparel?
in the apparel industry.
Sure.
And, and he was a believer. But we just had different work ethics and so, and different skill sets. And it worked great as a friendship, didn't work well as a partnership.
Right.
And so, I ultimately grew that into a store of my own called Bradford's in Houston. And, it was a great experience. In fact, I was at, Timaquana Country Club at the LifeWork Leadership graduation event a couple of nights ago. And my wife and I are coming out to the parking lot, and I noticed that one of my son-in-laws called me. He's a singer-songwriter in Nashville, very, very successful. And anyway, he just said, "Hey, call me tonight, or if not, you call me in the morning." But we were on our way home. I called him, and he said, "Hey, quick question for you. I am writing tomorrow with Boys to Men." You remember the group? Probably before big. You guys, but Boys to Men was a kind of a boy band.
Yep.
Yeah. And he wrote with them yesterday.
Wow.
And but he said, Leah, my daughter, said, you dressed them for an awards ceremony show back in the 90s. I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I did. Now, I never met them personally, but apparently their manager reached out, got my name and number, and called me and met me in Houston. And so I dressed these guys for the Grammys. And in fact, he actually did a little research. My son-in-law did a little research and found it. And he sends it to me. He goes, does this look familiar? And the image of them at the Grammys, I think it was in 1993.
Wow.
I'm like, I do remember that quite
crazy.
well.
That's like full circle right there.
Totally crazy. Yeah, totally crazy. So anyway, sometime in the mid to late, probably 1995, and I'm giving you guys a lot of, minutia here. There was a guy who came into my store one Saturday evening, and there's, you look back. Sometimes you're in the middle of it. You see God's hand at work. There's sometimes you don't. We know He's at work, but sometimes we can't see what's happening till later. You look back and go, "Wow, praise God." It was a Saturday night. My wife had come to pick me up at the store. We had a function we were going to that night, and the manager of the store, named Greg, calls me. I'm up in my office upstairs in the store, and he says, "Hey, Brad, just want to let you know Vicky's here to pick you up. And when you come down, before you leave, I want you to meet a guy who's here." And I said, "Oh, fine. I'll be down in just a minute." A couple minutes later, I go down and walk out onto the sales floor, and there's nobody in the store except this one guy. He's up at the counter, and my manager's ringing all this stuff up on the counter. Well, I mean, I made a point to always go say hello to people that were in my store. And so I go over, I introduce myself, and his name's Greg Festi. Well, as we start talking, did you grow up here in Houston? He goes, yeah, I grew up in Houston. I think he went to Memorial High School or something. And I said, okay, that's great. I said, so I was reminded of his name, Festi, Feste. And I said, now the reason I say that is because I went to college at TCU, and there was a guy named Greg Festi that went to school there, and he was a next door neighbor fraternity of mine. And the only reason I knew about him was this guy was crazy. You guys may have been that guy. I don't know.
Yeah.
This guy was crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And his best friend was crazy. And, I mean, they had a serious reputation. I'm sure good guys, but
sure.
Something about
Wild bunch.
something about those private Christian colleges, man, they can raise them well.
Exactly.
So I kind of just vaguely said, Greg, did you happen to go to TCU by any chance? And all of a sudden this look on his face was like, oh no, man, I'm busted.
He knows me.
Yeah, exactly. And he kind of said, yeah, I did. I said, I think you were an SAE, weren't you? He said, yeah. I said, well, I was a Fidel next door. He goes, yeah, those were rough days, but something like that.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that's awesome. I said, hey, I've got to go, but I'd love to connect with you sometime.
Yeah.
He gets a business card out, hands it out, and I look at it, and it says Malachi Financial. And I looked at him and said, Greg, Malachi is in the last book of the Old Testament? He said, yeah. I said, tell me about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And real quickly, he told me, gave my life to Christ about 2 years ago and felt God leading me to take the gifts God has given me and use it for the kingdom.
Yeah.
And so, of course, immediately I'm like, we're getting together.
Yeah.
I go out to my car. Now, check this out. I go out to the car. Vicky is like, what took you so long?
Mm-hmm.
You guys know me now.
Oh, yeah.
I can talk.
Oh, yeah.
So I get in the car. What took you so long? I said, Vicky, there's a guy in there we went to college with. You may not remember him. He may have graduated before you even got to school. But I said, this guy was a wild man at college. And he's in there right now buying some stuff. And he came to Christ recently. And his name's Greg Festi.
Mm-hmm.
She immediately says, what's his last name? I said, Festi. And she goes, is he married to a Kelly Festi? And I said, well, I don't know why. She said, well, this morning, she had a garage sale. My wife had a garage sale with our next door neighbor. And the first girl that came up bought an antique trunk from my wife. Her name was Kelly Festi. And she made a comment about my wife's sweatshirt, which was a Dallas Seminary sweatshirt of mine. Mm-hmm. And they ended up talking about seminary or whatever. And so anyway, that was pretty much it. She leaves. So I'm still in the car, haven't even put it in reverse. I said, well, hang on just a second. I go back in and I say, hey, Greg, quick question. Are you any relation to a Kelly Festi? And he looks at me like,
okay.
Yeah.
What are you getting at?
My wife is Kelly Festi. I said, well, your wife bought an antique trunk from my wife at a garage sale today. He looks at me, he's like, I just unloaded that a few hours ago.
Wow.
That's unbelievable. I said, that is wild. Now, you know how certain names kind of, they're just there. Then your past, you don't know where the connections are. I knew a Festi, a guy by the name of Dr. Joe Festi. And anyway, so I real quickly said, hey, I didn't know Joe Festi. But I said, are you any relation to a Joe Festi, a Dr. Joe Festi? Mm-hmm. And Greg goes, you know my dad? I said, your dad's Dr. Joe Festi? He goes, yeah. I said, is he an OB-GYN? Yes. I said, your dad delivered me.
That's insane.
Right? Now, this is not an exaggeration. We are both like, I mean, we're tearing up. We're like, this is a weird thing. Yeah. And believe me, I am not I am very,
level-headed, like,
But we're both like, this is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward, within days, he's invited me to go to a men's prayer group at his church. And I agreed to go. And I'm thinking I'm going, there's going to be, maybe 6, 8, 12 people there, 100 guys.
Wow.
At his church. Not for a message, no breakfast, coffee, maybe prayer. That's it. I thought, wow, this is incredible. Yeah. After our prayer time, he said, hey, you want to go get breakfast? I said, yeah, let's do it. Mm-hmm. So we started getting breakfast on a weekly basis. I didn't go to that church, but I went with him. And we started to build a friendship and talked a lot about business. The bulk of their business in the financial planning was in the area of professional athletics. So most of their clients were NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball players who professed Christ.
Wow.
So anyway, over the course of probably a year, 2 years, we're spending a lot of time together. We're talking a lot of business. Yeah. And but we're serious about our walk with Christ. And I don't know, 6 weeks after we had been meeting on a weekly basis, before we're about to leave this restaurant that we always went to, he said, hey, Brad, let me ask you a question. Would you consider being just an accountability partner of mine? Now, this is mid to latter. This is probably 96, somewhere in there. Promise Keepers was big. You guys may remember those days. And this accountability was kind of a buzzword everybody used. And so I had an idea of accountability. Well, Greg had a completely different view of accountability. And of course, he said, would you prayerfully consider being my accountability partner? I said, I didn't even flinch. I said, sure.
Let's do it.
And he immediately reaches in, gets a business card, and on the back of the card, he writes Kelly and puts a phone number there. slides it over to me.
Mm.
And he said, you have the right to call her whenever you feel led and ask her how I'm doing as a husband and as a dad. Now, I'm a recovering people pleaser. In fact, I still struggle with that.
Same here.
I get a business card out. I write on the back of that business card, Vicky, and put her phone number. And I got to tell you, I started to slide that over, but my hand was shaking as I slid that over. Now, you two guys look at me and think, this guy's got years of experience. And yes, I have an absolutely amazing marriage, but I give a lot of credit to Greg, my brother-in-law, certain people that God, sovereignly placed in my life to invest in me, not to talk a good talk, but to really challenge me. So as I slid that card over, in my mind, I'm thinking, man, I hope he never calls my wife. Because I was a good performer.
Yeah.
I had the spirit.
You're a salesman, so you just.
Well, yeah. And I had a spiritual veneer that looked great. I mean, I was a deacon at the church. I'm teaching, I'm doing, I've got this spiritual resume, but at home it was a different story. Yeah. And so, anyway, Greg one day called my wife. He said, I don't know what led me to do that. Holy Spirit, maybe. And I called your wife, and he caught her on a day that wasn't a good day. We've all had those. If you're married, you've had those. You've had multiple, probably. But on that
Too
day,
many to count already.
And he called me and basically said, hey, can you come down and hang out with me for a little bit? I'm like, well, not really. I'm busy. He goes, no, I need you to come down, hang out with me. I said, Greg, what's going on? He said, I just got off the phone with your wife. We need to talk. Now, how many guys do you know who have the courage to do that? I think every man needs a man to put a finger in your chest and an arm around your shoulder, which Greg was that for me.
Yeah.
I went down, we met, man, embraced. Man, I wept my eyes out in his office because, the performance side, and goodness, we were talking earlier just about the world we're living in with social media. It's this constant projecting of an image that's not real.
Yeah.
Well, listen, there's nothing new there.
Yeah.
It's just multiplied today. But, when you're a performer, when you're a people pleaser, and I'm doing things so that you look at me and think, wow, that's a heavy weight we're not meant to carry. And so I give Greg a lot of credit. I don't really keep up with Greg anymore, but I tell that story because I think every man needs a guy like that. There are very few guys out there like that. We love that story, but we don't want to be the guy in that story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We don't want to be the guy getting called out, and we don't want to be the guy calling the other guy out. Because we live in a time where we're like, you do you.
You're worried about hurting people's feelings.
Exactly.
It's all about that.
Yeah. So now, interestingly enough, I ended up going into business with Chris and with Greg and Chris. And that's what brought me to Jacksonville. So left the apparel industry, moved to Jacksonville to start the mattress firm, which was started in Houston. We bought a franchise and started one in Jacksonville, then Tampa, then Orlando, and we just kept expanding and growing. And so that was, a really great experience. It was a good, we owned it for about 5 or 6 years, probably built it to a substantial size. And then we sold that in 2002. Turned around within nine months to a year, bought the Whataburger franchise for the state of Florida, really Jacksonville, Orlando, and Tampa. Wow. And that was a rough season. So they had 5 years of a good season, and then we had 5 years of a very, very rough season through the recession.
Yeah.
And but you think of the scriptures that remind you that God gives and God takes away. Can you actually say, blessed be the name of the Lord?
Yeah.
So oftentimes that statement comes when things are good, not when things are rough. And as I said earlier, we can look back in life and praise him for what he did. I think the rougher seasons of business, exposed in me some idols I would have never known were there had he not, for lack of a better word, kind of pulled the rug out from under me.
Right.
And so that's kind of a little bit about my story. I spent the next probably 10 years doing some various odds and end business consulting. And about 10 years ago or so, I decided I want to find a business that I can make some money at, that doesn't require employees, that doesn't require office, but gives me flexibility. Our kids, we've got 5 kids. They're all married and they're all multiplying tremendously. They are being obedient to the word that said, be fruitful and multiply. We have 15 grandkids, 2 more expected in the next few weeks.
That's amazing.
So we kind of thought, okay, I need a business that allows me some flexibility to go to Nashville if I need to go to Nashville, or go sit at the ball field for 5 hours watching multiple kids play ball. So that was my entrance into the real estate world. And fortunately, my wife, who has been my pride for 40 years, had raised our kids, homeschooled them, said, I'd like to do something together. What can we do together? Real estate ended up being this one that we said, yeah, let's do that.
Wow.
So that was a journey.
Yeah.
You guys ready to close it up?
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like going back to when you were, younger, obviously sounds like you found a lot of success and you had a lot of that, people saying how good of a job you're doing. And how did that look like in your own life as far as feeling the success? And, you talked about how you are a people pleaser and so you enjoyed that aspect of things. How did that have an impact on, your spiritual life, and like, how did you stay spiritually grounded? And I don't think it's a bad thing to have that success. I think that there's, for every 1 mile of road, there's 2 miles a day. You can
Absolutely.
go in either direction. But how did you think that do you think you did a good job of staying grounded? What are things that you think helped during those seasons?
Well, it's interesting. I think most of us would say we didn't do a good job. And I mean, in reality, because we're probably critical. I think I'm type A. I'm a get it done. Give me a list. I'm going to charge it. And so I'm also on the flip side, I'm super critical of how I did. I was just meeting with a guy that I've been meeting with for 23 years. We meet once a week. And what's interesting is, 20 years ago, it was me really investing in him. Today, it's a little bit reversed in the sense that he has parents who are where I want to be, so I'm learning a lot from him. But there's just this mutual conversation going. And a lot of it is kind of confessing areas where we struggle and still struggle. I think as men, there's a great challenge especially among believers, to find our identity in our success or in what we do. You guys played sports, I think. I played sports. How easy it is to let your ups and downs ride on how well you performed. I mean, we live in a performance society that you want to make the big bucks, you got to perform. And so how do you reconcile this idea that God's given us a stewardship to do our work heartily as unto the Lord, Colossians 3:23. But how do we not find our identity in that? I think of scripture that says you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. You are a people of God's own possession. Now that's your identity. That's who I am. But then he gives the purpose. He gives your purpose on the back end. We're living in a time where people are trying to, who am I? Well, that as a Christian, that's who you are. Now, your purpose is that you might proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness and into his marvelous light. So there's identity, there's purpose. And the challenge for all people, I think, that are in the workplace, in the marketplace, working to feed their families, to do a great job, is to not find your identity there. Because there are going to be ups and downs. I just shared. I had ups in one business. I had downs in another. Both were great businesses. It was just timing. And, but you realize that's God's sovereignty. If I understand Romans 8:28, I have to marry that with Romans 8:29.
Right.
God causes all things to work together for good to those who love him and are called according to his purpose. That's 28. Well, it ends with purpose. What's his purpose? Well, he tells you in 29 that you might be conformed to the image of Christ. What is God going to do in my life to make me look more like Jesus? Well, he's going to do work. He's family, marriage, church, lots of things that he's going to do. So I think it's, Scripture says, don't be conformed to this world, be transformed. How? By the renewing of your mind. You and I, the three of us, will renew our minds somewhere today. Mm-hmm. It's a fact. You choose. You can turn on that. You can turn on the TV. I can open this up. I can renew my mind. Boy, that's a dangerous place to renew it, right? Yeah. Doesn't mean we don't have it. We have it, sure. But we better be renewing our mind in what God tells us, not in what you tell me or what I tell you.
Right.
I always say if it doesn't line up here, I quite honestly don't want to hear it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that's kind of the challenge as I matured in Christ, was understanding that my wife doesn't look at me any different whether I've made a lot of money and been successful or whether I haven't. Right. She really measures me by how am I being sanctified? Am I growing as a man, as a husband? And
are you loving her?
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. I say this often. I probably stole this from somebody, but you don't measure the spiritual maturity of a man outside the home. You measure it inside the home. It's why Greg, when he handed that business card, he goes, you have the right to call my wife whenever you feel led to ask her how I'm doing as a husband and a father. And we need that, because I can perform out of the home. You put me in the home, I can be lazy.
Yeah.
And that's where I want to be at my best. Do I want to do well at work? Absolutely. But I want to do exceptionally well at home. And we were having dinner probably 6 months ago in Nashville with 2 or 3 of our kids there. And we're sitting at a restaurant outside, beautiful day. And we just kind of went around the table, and it was probably one of the greatest compliments, even though I don't know if my kids were making a compliment necessarily, but all 3 of my kids that were there said, what we wanted out of marriage is what you and mom had. And I thought, well, that's success to me. So when you think of Kingdom ROI, how do we measure that?
Yeah.
So if you were to ask me, success, I go, well, let's define what that is.
Sure.
Because you could look at a balance sheet and go, wow, that's a profitable business. Sure. But return on investment is kingdom minded. So I appreciate the name, obviously.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think there's a lot of truth to that, especially, me being earlier stages of marriage right now. My wife and both my wife and I are both in business, but I tell Trent all the time, like, Trent's not married. So I try to tell him,
come on, Trent.
I try to tell him the lessons that I'm learning already, but like, it's just hilarious to me. And I'm thankful that God has given me Morgan, because areas she's strong in, I'm obviously weak at. And the one thing being in business is it is most times so fast paced. You're very success driven. What have I done today? I mean, as guys, that's what we're fueled by.
Yeah.
What did we do today? What did we accomplish?
Yeah.
And I'll come home and tell Morgan, hey, I did this. I landed this job or whatever. And she's like, that's great. But at the end of the day, the only thing Morgan wants is intentional time with her.
Amen.
And am I pouring into her?
Amen.
So that's been such a learning curve, because that's not how I'm wired, but you can really see, and I can see in my own life, that's the number one way the devil's attacked me, is to take away that intentionality and time and investment into her.
Amen.
How am I leading her? So that's been, I think, such a big correlation, especially in business. Is it's great what you're doing, but like you said, if your life is in shambles at home, that's going to reflect anywhere. That's the legacy you're passing on. And obviously you are modeling what that looks like to pass a legacy on with your family and your kids. So,
well, I appreciate that. I heard this the other day. Legacy isn't what you leave for someone. It's what you leave in someone. And so I think the importance of that, and I think of my own father who, he may listen to this. I don't know. He listens to us regularly. These aren't just words. I really mean this. And I mean, I've got endless stories of a man who may not be able to quote the verse, but he lives it.
Right.
It's kind of the idea. If your orthopraxy doesn't line up with your orthodoxy, it's worthless.
Yeah.
You're just a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal, the scriptures say. And again, these are the things that I say this often, that I am so grateful for my wife. I believe, apart from God's word and his spirit, she's been the greatest instrument in the hands of an almighty God to transform this wretched man that I am. But there's a part of you that has to let that happen too. There's a humility that says, in other words, theologically, we could say, well, God is sovereign. Well, then my wife is not plan B here. This is God's plan. And I am incredibly grateful. I still lead her, but man, has she had an impact in my life spiritually.
Sure.
And it better be that way. Yeah. And that's the beauty of watching my own parents. My mother had a terminal illness over the last 5 years of her life. And certainly on the surface, anybody would look at that and go, oh, it's awful. Let me tell you, those were 5 years of the most God-honoring, God-glorifying years that I could have ever seen in my life. To watch my dad lay down his life for his bride. And you stood at the altar. Trent, you're going to stand at the altar one day. You're going to make vows for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health. Well, it tells you you're going to have those seasons. The fact of the matter is, there's going to be sickness and there's going to be health. We don't want to face that, but that's a reality. God is sovereign. He's going to allow that to happen. And we're going to grow, if we don't kick against the goads as Paul did, so.
Have you read the book Wild at Heart?
Yes.
John Eldredge?
Yep.
We just went to a boot camp where it was like basically off that book. And now finally for myself reading through it, the video series that they showed basically was the book. But I'm like, dude, that was, for us, like, it's never been more applicable even since it was written 2003 or whenever it came out. But that's like the biggest thing that, we kind of took away too, and we just didn't even realize was the impact of fatherhood.
Yeah.
Not only on your daughter, like if you're a daughter and you look up to your dad, but especially in the man.
Yeah.
So that's just like one of the questions that the guy asked is, do I measure up?
Yeah.
What am I, do I have what it takes?
Yeah.
And so you can see the thankfulness and gratefulness that you have for your dad. What has that done for you? And what do you hope to accomplish and pass down to your kids, just in what you are instilling in them and investing in them?
Yeah, boy, so important. I love Wild at Heart. You think of the books that, I've been able to read, and I encourage guys, I don't care what age you are, I don't care what your background, discipline-wise. I meet with guys all the time. First time I ask them, there's 4 or 5 things that I ask them. I start with, what's the last book you read? Because I want you to start reading. I want you to read this, but I want you to read. I want you to be men who read. Not on this. I want you to get a book and read it, highlight it, underline it, whatever it is you do.
Dive into it.
And I don't care if you read, 20 pages a day or 2 pages a day. But I want you to be a man who reads. I want to know what your prayer life is. I want to know what you're listening to, what you're watching. Those are very important things because, as I said, don't be conformed to this world. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. I kind of want to know where are you getting renewed, And so that's something very important. Love that book. There's a great book called Raising a Modern Day Knight. I don't know if you guys ever heard it. It's not a very popular book, but it's a big one on my list, especially for young dads, even older guys my age. And it really is a book about how we need to celebrate the next generation. That with my boys, it's not just telling them I'm proud of you. It's celebrating them and celebrating them lavishly, actually. So you pick certain times over the, 20 years that they may be under your roof, and you may celebrate them at 14. What's interesting, you ask 10 Jewish men, when does a boy become a man? They know, you ask 10 Christian men, when does a boy become a man? You're going to get 10 different answers. When he starts driving, when he starts dating, whatever. I mean, just name it. So the idea is that we're going to celebrate you at this time. I'm going to celebrate you when you graduate. Maybe it's high school or it's college. We're going to celebrate you when you get married. We have a crest within our home, our house, and we have these ceremonies where you're going to get celebrated, and we're going to bring the community of men around you to encourage you and to say, hey, we're with you here.
Right.
So one really critical point, as my kids were growing up, and specifically my boys, so I've got 2 boys and 3 girls, and I'll get emotional. I start talking about family, especially my boys. Listen, I'd had a dozen girls. I love girls, but I probably, when my oldest was about 14, I'm teaching a Bible study on the West Side. You guys, it's Lockwood Holmes. It's a Bible study he started years ago. I've been teaching there now over 20 years, and I love these guys. And I would go over there Tuesday morning. I'd have my Bible in tow. I'd have my lesson printed out, and there I go. Well, one time, I think it was a Monday night, I'm finishing up my lesson. I send it to the printer, prints. I get up, and my wife says to me, hey, have you ever considered inviting Ben? This is my oldest son, who's 14. Have you ever considered inviting him to the Bible study? And I kind of probably looked at her like, this is a men's study.
Why?
She goes, so? Your wife will do that sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
So?
Absolutely.
And I thought, well, it's, these are men, he's a boy. And she goes, I think you ought to invite him. Well, as much as I probably didn't want to do that, I thought she's probably right. So I go back, I wake up my son, who's probably been in bed for an hour, and I kind of shook him. I said, hey, Ben, you want to go to Bible study in the morning? Well, he knows I've been doing this Bible study for years. Right. He's like, he got stoked. He was so excited. Yes. I said, okay, I'll wake you up in the morning. So I wake him up, take him. And, man, we had a great time. And let me tell you, these old men just loved on him. It was incredible. But what was cool, it wasn't that he got to sit and watch his dad teach. It was the conversation from the Bible study back home where we talked about what dad taught, and as a dad, to be able to be honest with my 14-year-old, then 15, then 16, then 17, then 18. Sure. So about 6 months after I've taken him to this Bible study every week, and it's Monday night, Dad, I'm going, like, great. And just the relationships he developed within that group of men. One night, my wife and I are sitting on the sofa, just talking. Kids are in bed. And she makes the comment, and you're going to do this as you have kids, is there going to be those conversations. And my wife said, have you noticed that Ben just seems so much more mature than he was a year ago? I go, he really is. He is really growing up. And she said, what do you think that is? I said, I have no idea.
There's a reason.
Little did I know, he was actually in the room next to us. We live in an old house, not open concept. It's like where each room it's separate deal. I didn't know he was in the room next to us, hearing us have this conversation. And he peeks around the corner and he says, hey, I heard what y'all were talking about. I'm like, I thought you were in bed.
Yeah.
And he said, can I say something? I said, of course. He goes, Dad, I think the difference today than, say, a year ago is that when you started taking me to that Bible study, I wanted to be a man.
Mm.
So different from the culture that we're raising kids in. We're like, no, man, these kids need to be around other kids. I'm not saying they don't. They really need to be around dad, and they need to be around other men. And what he basically said is, when you put me around other men, I want to be a man. When I'm around my friends,
Yeah.
Right. Scripture, Proverbs is very clear about that. Well, certainly the next week I took my younger son, started taking him at probably 11 or 12 to that Bible study. And both of those guys grew up going to that Bible study.
Mm.
And again, it wasn't just to hear their dad teach. It was to be around men who were pursuing the Lord. And there was conversations coming home from those studies. And just the intentionality that's required to raise up another generation.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is not a knock on youth ministry. I think I've been on boards of youth ministries. I support youth ministries, but the best youth pastor is mom and dad. And if we don't get back to that, don't be surprised that we have a generation that rejects the truth of the gospel. So, I think, again, Kingdom ROI for me isn't necessarily what I do in the marketplace. It's really what I do at home and the fruit of that. Now, I'd love to tell your listeners, hey, do X, Y, and Z, and it's all going to turn out great.
Yeah.
It's not. You guys have stories. I've got stories of people that you would think did it right. And things didn't work out right. Things didn't work out as you thought they would.
Right.
So I think I don't know if I answered your question, but I think there's an element of, legacy is that what I want more than anything from my children is for them to have a marriage, not void of difficulties, because they're going to have them.
Yeah.
James says, consider it pure joy when you encounter trials. Trials are coming. What I want them is to have a fruitful marriage that honors Christ. That takes work. It isn't church attendance. It's not even, man, look at this resume, this spiritual resume I've got. It is, I am going to die to myself. My youngest son got married about 3 or 4 years ago, and I'll never forget. Now I've used it in weddings that I've conducted. His pastor comes out. I'm his best man at his wedding. I was the best man at both my sons' weddings. And so to watch this, almost the first thing the pastor said is he said, well, welcome to this wedding ceremony. But you're not only here for a wedding ceremony, you're also here for a funeral. Now, how many pastors are going to begin a wedding like that?
Right.
I knew exactly where he was going.
Yeah.
For this marriage to honor Christ, we're going to have to die as men. We don't like that,
Yeah.
And so I think, when I think about marriage, when I think about family, when I think about Kingdom ROI, whether it's in work or it's in raising a family, as leaders, we're going to have to die at times. In fact, more times than you probably want to admit. So,
yeah, as we kind of wrap it up and bring it to a close, a big theme of our conversation today has been centered around people in your life that have been accountability partners, that have been there for you in times that you've needed. We call it, your Mac carriers, the people around you that are going to be there. They're your 2 a.m. people you can call up and they're there for you. So kind of like a call to action for our listeners that are looking for somebody like that. Maybe they're not affiliated with a church. Maybe they're looking for and seeking that out. What is some practical things that throughout your life you were able to find the people who are like, I want that person to be my counterpart?
Well, we started the conversation about younger generation, older generation. When I moved to Jacksonville in 1997, probably about a year of, I am running like crazy building this business. And, but what's interesting is, on the balance sheet, we were successful, but I was not fulfilled. I just was almost, I don't know how to, I would say I was depressed maybe, I don't get depressed very easily. I'm a pretty upbeat, positive kind of guy, but I felt a little depressed, and my wife and I are sitting there talking, and she's, what's wrong exactly? I said, I feel like I'm missing my dad. I'm missing my brother-in-law who gave me this Bible. I'm missing men in my life. And it's easy for us to, whether you're moving to a new city as I did, or you may just be innately a bit of an introvert. We, as men, we like to isolate. Now, I like to hang out with you guys, but I can tell you, there's part of me that just wants to be by myself. And, but God didn't design us to be like that. And so I shared that with my wife, and she said, well, why don't you reach out to somebody at church? Wife's a wise woman.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I'm building this business. We're attending church. I don't have any relationships at church. There are two guys that I noticed at church. We've all had that. Like, I don't know this guy. I just like what I see. Could be false, but I'm just interested in getting to know these guys. So there were two guys, Frost Weaver and a guy named Bud Toole, who were elders at the church that I was at, still at. And Bud Toole's gone home to be with the Lord. Frost Weaver's still in my life today. Older guys, 20 plus years older than I am. And I called both of those guys one day. I said, hey, Frost, you don't know me. We attend the same church. I'm just wondering, would you be willing to grab lunch with me or breakfast with me? Sure. Love to do that. And I'll never forget, at the IHOP on Bay Meadows, I sat across the table just like this from Frost Weaver. And I said, and he asked me, so what can I do for you? And I said, I don't know exactly, but I need an older man in my life who's been down the road. I'm not looking at you to have all the answers, but I am looking at you as a wiser person who knows things I don't know. And I just need that. And he's like, I'd love to do that. Same thing with Bud Toole. Same thing. What can I do for you, Brad? I need an older guy in my life. There's a younger generation that needs older men in their life. And those older men aren't going to come find you. You need to go find them. So that's how I would answer that. I think we need young men who recognize they need wisdom in their life. James tells us, if you lack wisdom, ask of God. But I think God provides that through godly men, older men, not perfect men, but men who've been down the road a little bit. But to the older men who may be listening, the older men better be available, because there's a lot of young men today who are
need direction and wisdom.
Totally. And they want it. And are there enough older guys out there available? Because there's a lot of older guys like me who go, yeah, but I'm a train wreck.
Yeah.
You may be, but you still have wisdom. You've still got life experience, so that's how I would answer that.
Yeah. It's awesome. I think that pretty much ties it together. That was awesome.
Good.
We appreciate it, man. That was a powerful story, but a lot of truth behind that, and just what it means to be a man, and just obviously our heart posture has to be right with the Lord in order to accomplish, what we're doing in business or any walk of life, but specifically in your marriage, if you're married, and what you're passing down to your kids. Because, like we said, your kids are very observant. They're watching what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely.
And so when you're intentionally pouring into them, means a lot.
I think when it comes to work, the things we do, I think the areas that we serve other people, whether it's your clients, your employees, your children, your wife, I think as men, we ought to be the chief repenters. We ought to be the first to say, I messed that up. Forgive me. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Those are that's the language we need today. Some people may go, well, that's pansy. That's weak. No, I think it takes a man to say, I'm going to own that.
Absolutely.
I messed that up. I'm truly sorry, and I need you to forgive me. And I think when it comes to work, I think, man, model that at work. You know what I mean? I don't care where you are in the pecking order of that organization. You start to own your stuff. It'll transform a business. It'll transform a marketplace in general, so.
It's awesome.
Enjoyed being with you guys.
Yeah.
We really
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Time out of your busy schedule.
Next time we'll talk about work.
Yeah, exactly. Seriously.
Well, doesn't matter how successful you are at work. If there's not success at home,
It's a failure. It's going to come crumbling apart at some point.
it is.
Yeah.
It is. And I think God's not going to say, well done, you hard worker, you great builder of enterprise. I think he's going to go, well done, you good and faithful servant.
Absolutely.
So we need to be servants.
Yeah.
So,
awesome. Well, thanks,
deal.
Brad. We
You bet.
appreciate it.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah, man.
Yep.
Take care.